So we're going to be inside of the pivot tables file today. So if you'll just go ahead and download that pivot tables file. And the pivot tables file already has the pivot tables from last semester. We're going to make new ones this semester though, just kind of play around with them. So I'll give everyone a minute or two to download that. Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and go over to commands and terms to know. I'm just going to briefly go through conditional formatting. So conditional formatting is basically going to allow us to apply various formatting, like for instance, we could highlight a cell, we could change a font color, those are the main two things we're going to be doing, changing the font color or changing the highlight color of a cell. So just what I'm talking about is, let's say we have a cell here. Okay, so this is a cell. I highlight the cell, now it's yellow. That's one example of highlighting. And then of course I could also change the font color if I were so inclined. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. But we can actually do that based on criteria that we specify. So all we have to do is just highlight the data we want to apply this to. I'm just going to use the months data. Highlight all that. And now come up to your conditional formatting menu. And you can see we have a lot of options. Okay, so we can do stuff based on the top and the bottom. So we go like top 10, top 1, top percentage. That's certainly something we could do there. We could, of course, also apply other rules to it. So we can do stuff that is greater than a specific number, less than a specific number. We can do ranges if we wanted, using between, and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to do a couple examples of that. But does everyone understand what that should do? Anyone need me to repeat anything? Yeah. Okay, what's the error message? Are you in Canvas or are you in Excel? Let me take a quick look. Any other questions while I'm walking over? Yeah, what's your question? All right. So just hit the download button right there. I just go ahead and show in folder. I just double click that. So it looks like, do you have so using a Chromebook? You might want to use the regular computer there, because I think that for a lot of this stuff you won't be able to do in, because that's not Microsoft Excel technically. So yeah, what's your message you're getting? So yeah, you just open it. So just hit OK. Go back to Canvas. Yeah, so just click that. Now you'll download it. Just click that. And hit Save File. All right, so go to your downloads there. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. What do you mean it won't turn on? So the computer looks like it's turned off. So you just have to press the power button on it. Okay, but I'll show you how to open it on that. So just click download. So now you'll just go ahead and open it down there. I think so. So that was on a Chromebook. So just hit enable editing and you should be all set. Does anyone else having issues getting to this point? All right, I'm always happy to address any questions. So, you guys feeling greater than or less than today? It's a Monday. Let's do less than. You know what? Let's do greater than. All right. Someone throw over your favorite number between, let's do 2 and 11. 7. All right. So what we're going to do is we can set whatever we want for what the formatting condition will actually be. The default is going to be a light red fill with dark red text. Okay. I think that larger numbers are usually better. Okay, unless we're talking about numbers like unpaid debt. That's probably not a good number to be good about. But we're talking about revenue or profit. Larger numbers are what? Better or worse? Ceteris paribus. Better. So why not make this green? How about green fill with dark green text? Just hit OK. And you can see that that's going to apply the formatting to everything that is greater than 7. Okay, does that make sense? So that could certainly be a useful thing to do. All right, we can also do things like top-bottom rule, so we could do the top 10 items. We could do whatever format we want. Let's go to custom format this time. Okay, so let's say we just wanted to change the fill, for instance. So we can certainly do that fairly easily. Just come over here to your fill options. Select your favorite green. Pick whatever green you want. Okay. Just hit OK. And now you've selected the rule to apply to the top 10%, which with 12 items is going to be the top 1 item, right? So let's go ahead and do a couple more examples just to make sure everyone's on the same page. We can do above average if we wanted. Oh, let's do below average. Okay, so below average, just going to leave the default as red. So we're just going to leave that as is. And now you can see everything that's below average. So everyone with me? We'll do one more. All right, so I'm just going to, let's actually do data bars. Data bars is kind of fun. Okay, so what data bars is going to do is, let's say we have a cell. And inside the cell, it's going to tell me basically what proportion of it is there. So it may look something like this, and you're still going to have your value. Does that make sense? So it's going to give us like a little mini graph inside of each cell. Kind of cool thing to do. All right. Does everyone understand how I did that? So it's saying that 12 of this data set is 100%. And it's saying that 1 is, of course, right around 8%. And we see that it's filled accordingly. So that's data bars. Any other questions? All right. Well, let's hop over to the worksheet for quarterly data. So inside the quarterly data worksheet, we're going to start off with pivot tables. All right, so the gist of what a pivot table is we grab all the columns that we're interested in, and then we create a pivot table. Once we've created a pivot table, we can easily take fields in and out of the specific table. And it's going to make a lot more sense once we see it. So let's just go ahead and grab these first 3 columns here. Let's grab A through C. Let's go to Insert, and just click Pivot Table. So like I said, just grab the first 3 columns in the quarterly data. Grab those first 3 columns, Insert, Pivot Table. Is everyone following? Okay, so if you didn't grab everything before you went to pivot table, you can just select the range inside this table or range. Personally, I recommend that you just you click everything, select it first, then go to insert pivot table. All right, we're going to put this in a new worksheet, and we can just hit OK. All right. So now down here, we have a new pivot table. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this. So I'm just going to call this quarterly pivot because before I called it Q pivot. So it's going to be quarterly pivot. Okay. And you guys remember how to change the name of a worksheet, right? So there's a couple different ways. Double click it, or you could also right click rename. Those are the two ways to rename a worksheet. So once you got the pivot table open, just click inside the pivot table, and it's going to open up the pivot table fields. Okay, so I'm going to go through these and tell you what they are. Filters are going to be used to include or exclude certain categories or observations. So we'll see an example of that, don't worry. Columns, I think you all know what a column is by now. Column is going to be something we place into the columns. Okay, a row is going to break the thing down by rows. And lastly, values is going to be returning some numeric value. Okay, we can change that by stuff like average, count, min, max, all those sorts of things we can set inside of values. So this sort of thing is going to make more sense once we do it. So I think right off the bat, maybe we're interested in the years. So we'll make year the row. So all you have to do is just drag from the field list, just drag that into rows. And that goes ahead and breaks down all the years that we have in the data set that are unique. Does everyone see that? So we have 2014 through 2017. All right, and we really only have one numeric field. What is it? Revenue, right? So we just take revenue, we're just going to drag it down to values. Okay, and right now this is sum of revenue. All right, does everyone see that? So we can actually change that if we wanted. Okay, let's say we didn't want sum. Let's go to value field settings. All you have to do is just click on that little arrow. So just click on this arrow right here. And we can change it to various other things. So I think sum probably makes the most sense because what this is doing is this is taking all the 2014 revenue and it's adding it up. That probably makes the most sense, right? If we wanted though, we could take the average. Count would be pretty much completely meaningless. Why? It's just going to be 4 for everything, right? Because there's 4 quarters. Let's see. So exactly right, okay? That's pretty much meaningless in this context. But we can do it, okay? The fact that we can do it is kind of cool. So let's change that from count. Just click on that arrow, value field settings. Let's leave it at sum, okay? So everyone to this point. All right, so now we can go back to insert. And we can do, let's just do a basic 2D column chart. Okay. So that goes ahead and includes us a nice little graph up here with our sum of revenue by year. So looking at this visually, what sorts of information can we gather? Jawin or Jawan, or how do you say that? Jadin? Javin. Let me write that down. Javin. All right. What can we gather from this? So for the graph, you just go to Insert. And I just use this option right here for the basic 2D column chart. Sure thing. All right, what kind of information can we gather from this? Jeff. It's increasing. Okay. For revenue to increase, is that most likely a good sign? Most likely. Okay. Now, what do we not have to determine if it's actually a good sign? cost, expenses, that sort of thing, okay? Because is it possible that we spend a bunch of money on marketing and promotions to get a bunch of customers? Is that possible? And that may mean that we're not doing well, but most likely we're doing fine. All right, questions up to this point? That's the basics of the pivot table. All right, you guys ready for something more exciting? Okay, let's change the rows. Let's remove year, and let's make it quarter. Okay. So all I did was I just took the field that was in rows, just removed it, just clicked it and dragged it to the field list, and then I just grabbed quarter. Okay. So, looking at this, what can we determine about this? So we're still using sum of revenue, which probably makes the most sense, although in this context, could you make an argument that average revenue by quarter makes more sense rather than sum? I'd certainly buy that argument. So let's change this to average. Okay, and it doesn't change the overall proportion, but if we had an uneven number of quarters within the data set, that would definitely make a big difference, right? All right. What can we determine about the revenue by quarter? Okay. Larkin, right? So Larkin's saying that fourth quarter has the highest revenue. And we can tell that because the bar is the tallest. Okay. We could also look at the pivot table. Okay, so looking at this table right here, we can see that this number right here is a lot larger than any of the other numbers, okay? Is everyone following this? So that's a basic pivot table. This has just 3 fields, okay? Like I say, not the most exciting thing, but I just want to kind of show you all how you would go about making a pivot table. Now, let's say that you don't like a bar chart. Okay, so I'm just going to delete it. Say you like a pie chart. Okay, can you do a pie chart? Sure. All right, this shows pretty much the exact same thing, only it doesn't show the average anymore, it just shows the relative proportion. So we can still see that 4 has the largest relative proportion. All right. So that's how you would do a basic value there. So, is everyone clear on how to do a basic pivot? Like I said, any questions, I'm always happy to address. We've got plenty of time today just doing pivot tables. All right, let's go ahead and do a new pivot table. Let's go to the wine table, okay? So before, we used quarterly data that had how many columns were we using before? 3. All right. I'm not going to count how many columns there are here, but there's quite a few. All right. So of note, let's just go through this briefly. Okay. So we have a first name column and a last name column. So more likely, though, we have another column that's going to be first and last name, and that's going to be what we're going to be using here mostly. So we have name and cust. So this has the customer number in it. So you can tell what I did here to create this was I just used a formula, and I start off with a relative reference to cell A2, which is the customer number, right? And then I use the ampersand symbol, okay? So the ampersand allows me to put 2 cells together. That process is called concatenation. All right, make sure you take notes on concatenation. All right, just a quick review. How do we concatenate? What symbol? Ampersand, exactly. All right, and then I put a space. So I just did an open parentheses, or not parentheses, I meant to say quotation marks. Put a space in there. Did another ampersand. Did cell C2, which is first name. Did the same thing, another ampersand, open quotation marks, space, close quotation marks. And then another ampersand and D2, which is last name. So that's all I had to do to get this. Now, the reason I got that like that, And the reason I started off with the customer number, is it good I have practice to assume that that there won't be two customers with the same first and last name? Probably not the best practice to assume that, right? Okay. In this data set, I actually don't know if there are customers with different numbers with the same name. But I don't want to assume that there aren't. Does that make sense? So it's best practice to do something like this. And like I said, it's already done for you, but that's how you'd go about it. All right. So we also have zip code, the state the customer's in. Year acquired, we could do stuff with that if we wanted. We're going to ignore these ranked variables. They don't really mean much. Here's an important field right here. This is the total sales from 2009 and 2010. So what we did to calculate this field, we just took the 2009 sales and added them to the 2010 sales. Okay, and each of these rows is an order, by the way. So if we look over here at the orders for 2008, or 2009, I mean, you can see this customer had 8 orders. And that's why they're in here 8 times for the 2009. Okay, so these first 8 rows right here, so they're all for 1 year. So you see Joe French down here had 2 orders in 2009. And if we scroll, we see lots of different stuff. Okay, is everyone with me so far? So we also, of course, have the orders 09 and 010. And this is saying for those 2 years, how many times did the customer order from us? All right, that's the basic stuff we're going to be using. So just like before, we're just going to go ahead and grab all those columns we want. So just click and drag up there in the column. And how do we insert a pivot table? Let's say I forgot. Someone tell me how to do it. Insert, and then click pivot table, right? So we're going to leave the table range. A through X is perfectly fine. And we're just putting in a new worksheet. All right, so we're just going to hit our good friend OK. All right, we're in a new worksheet. Now we want to rename this. We already have the pivot table called wine pivot down here. So someone throw me their favorite name for this pivot table. How about new wine pivot table? Just call it new wine pivot. I'm not always the most creative person when it comes to names. Okay, I like a name to make sense. Don't really care if it's a cool name. All right. So let's do some basic stuff here. We have unique customer ID, but what's the problem with using customer ID? Okay. Does the number 500 mean anything to anyone in here for a customer in this data set? And we could use first name. What's the problem with using first name? Could be a bunch of Joes, could be a bunch of Andrews, could be a bunch of whatever name, you know? So that's why we made that variable, by the way. So I'm just going to scroll through this. And on your screen, it'll probably be a lot easier to do this because I'm zoomed way in so that hopefully you all can see what I'm doing. But on your screen, you'll probably have a lot more sort of real estate to work with there. So I'm just going to scroll through here until we find the name and cust. We're going to put that in rows. Okay. So what this did is this took all those names of the customers and it gave us all the unique ones. Okay. So this is our customer list. And what we can do now is we can do stuff like how many orders did they place. Okay. So let's just search for order. So I'm going to use this orders 09, 010 variable here. And I'm just going to place that into values. Yeah. You can just click into the pivot table usually. Worst case, you'd probably have to recreate it, but usually just clicking back into the pivot table will open it. All right, so right now we're on sum of orders 09 and 10. So what this did is this went back to the rows, and this added up all those. So if you think back to how that's calculated, this is actually wrong. Who can tell me why? Okay, so if you were to go back to the wine data, you would see that each of the rows has the same orders 09 and 10. Okay, because that's basically saying they ordered 16. So this first customer, this D. Gettinger, ordered 16 times. And we're showing 256. Okay, so that is 16 times 16, right? What's the problem with that? How can we fix it? So right now we're taking the sum of those, which is how we're getting 16 times 16. So come down here to the value field settings. Just to refresh, you just click this down arrow right here. Go to value field settings, and there's a couple different things we could use here. So I would personally recommend with the max, but you don't have to use the max. You could certainly use the min as well, and you could also use the average. Okay, so those are your three options here. You could probably get away with using count too. I would just say, for simplicity's sake, just use max. Okay, so just kind of looking at this data, it's not really sorted in any way, is it? We may be interested in who's ordering the most often. Okay, so to do that, just come over here to the fields, just right-click somewhere like right here, go to sort. Let's do largest to smallest. Okay, so now like I said, we got someone who ordered 22 times from us in 2 years. Okay, does that mean that they're a high-valued customer? Maybe, maybe not. They could be doing really small orders. So what do you think we may do to figure out if these people are actually ordering a large amount? I think you may want to add in sales. So let's come down here and find the sale variable. So first let's clear our search. Now let's just find the sales 0910. And we could put this in values as well. Okay? And now this tells us there's sum of the sales, but the problem is that this value is already a sum. Okay? Does everyone understand that? So what we're going to do instead, is we're just going to come over here, do the same thing like before, just go to value field settings, and we're going to change this one to max as well. Okay, so now looking at this, we can tell this guy in total bought $2,400 across 22 orders. Okay, that contrasts with a D. Gettinger guy who bought $46,912 across 16 orders. So who's really the high-value customer? Okay, is it this dude who likes to do small orders, or is it this dude who likes to do orders of like 3,000 on average? Okay, it's this dude right here, right? So we could certainly sort, instead of sorting by the max orders, we could certainly sort by this guy. Okay, and that's going to tell us who our top orderers are. I think I saw a hand up earlier. So you're saying like if you just closed out of this, so you could just click into the pivot table usually. Whoops. That's certainly one way. Another way would just be to recreate the pivot table. Sometimes that's a little bit quicker. There's really several different ways though. So you can just go to like pivot table analyze, and I think it's this button right here. But there's several different ways. You go to field list, for instance, that'll get you back there. So you just click on the field list from pivot table analyze. Yeah. So what I did for that was I just made sure to make sure this was on the max. And then you also sort. So you just go to sort. All right, and like I said, this is a basic example of a pivot table, okay? Now, we could completely shift gears. We could say we don't care about individual customers, okay? That's not generally a good thing to say as a business owner, by the way. But for this example, I'm just showing you we can care about more than just customers. Let's go ahead and take this name and cust out. And let's instead add in state. I think I have state variable. Let's add in state as a row. Now, right now we have max. Okay, now we don't want to use max anymore. Okay, because if we use max, it's only going to get one customer from each state. And that's not really accurate, is it? Okay, so we want to change these over here from max. Let's change them to sum. Okay, let's see who our biggest states are, for sales at least. So how do we do that? We want to see the states ordered by the sales. So what do? So I right click and go to sort, and let's do largest to smallest. Okay? So we can say Florida. Okay? We can also say Washington. You got Texas and California. Now, of these four, which would you say is likely the most surprising? Washington. Why? It's got the lowest population of these by a good chunk, I think. Is anyone from Washington? What's the population in Washington, Jeff? Does anyone know the population of Washington? It's definitely smaller than Florida. California for sure too. I mean, 7.6 million. Okay, appreciate that, Larkin. So yeah, I mean, looking at this, that's a little bit surprising. Is it possible we're headquartered in Washington? Sure. Okay. Does everyone understand what I'm talking about so far? Now, what's another interesting thing about this? Okay, there's not that many orders in Washington yet. That's a huge value there, 1.3 million. Okay, that means they're ordering in bulk, right? So we have different classifications of customer. Let's just go ahead and take out all this stuff. Okay, let's just take it all out. All right, let's go ahead and clear our search from state. And there's a variable in here that is going to be for classification of customer. I'm just going to find it real fast. Customer segment, that's what it's called. Okay, so put that in rows. And now you can see we've got 4 primary categories of wine customers. By the way, I should make a note, I don't endorse nor condemn any activities in this class, okay? So I'm not suggesting that you drink wine. I'm not suggesting you don't drink wine. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm not here to tell you what or what not to consume. Just use this as an example data set. Hope that doesn't upset anyone too much. So now we have our different categories of customer. Okay, so you would assume that a casual visitor probably has a pretty low average sale, right? You would assume that a high roller, which one of these do you think might be the highest without checking? So wine enthusiast, what about high roller? Okay, luxury estate, they usually have a large collection, right? Okay, all right, let's see who has the largest. So we're just going to use the sale 09010. And right now that puts that into sum, okay? What's the problem with that? We don't have a clue how many orders this casual visitor corresponds with. How can we correct that? Okay, so go down here to values, go to value field settings. What might we change that to instead? So count will tell us how many sales there were. It's not necessarily telling us the size of those sales. So average, okay? So now, let's go ahead and insert, why not a line chart? We did a bar chart and other stuff. It's not really a line chart, but anyway, you get the idea, okay? That's how you do a line chart. It's not a great example of a line chart because it's not continuous. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? So let's actually change this chart. It's going to bother me too much. Just change it to a 2D column chart. All right, and it should be pretty apparent that high rollers have the highest average sales. Is everyone following me? So that's what we're doing here. Okay. Pivot tables aren't that complicated, are they? All right. But that gives us a lot of insight, and you may think it's a quick way to do things. Not to bias anyone, but pivot tables really aren't my favorite thing to do in Excel. Okay, I'm more of a hard formula numbers kind of guy. But I'm sure many of you like pivot tables, okay, more than doing hard formulas and numbers. This is an example where there's multiple ways to do things, okay? You can use Excel, and you can never touch a pivot table, okay? Who's done a pivot table before today? Okay, anyone? I don't see any hands up. Maybe a few of you have, but they're not something you necessarily have to use, okay? You can choose to use them. All right, I think this class ends at 10 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? 15 minutes, that's enough time for one more. All right. So let's come over here to our audit data set. And you can see we've got our ages in here. We've got if they're employed at a public or private company. And it looks like we also have consultants. So a consultant, of course, would be like a 1099 employee. We have education level. Marital status, if they're married. Absent, we can assume that's probably the equivalent of not having the status at all. Okay, I think we know what married, unmarried, divorced. I think we know what all that means. Have the basic occupation here, as well as the income level. Got the gender, got male or female there. The hours that they work. And then risk adjusted, I believe that is how likely they're to be audited. And target adjusted is if they were actually audited. All right. So let's just do some quick things with this. Let's say I forgot how to make a pivot table. Someone walk me through it start to finish. What do I do first? So I select the data by just grabbing all these columns, right? Now what? Insert pivot table. Okay, we can just put in a new worksheet, right? Just use new worksheet. Just come down here, rename it. Whoops. Rename it to new pivot or new audit pivot. All right, so what do you guys want to see? You guys want to see the age? You guys want to see the profession? Anyone have anything they're dying to see? So occupation, let's do that as a row. And how about income? See what these are making. Okay, now it gives us by default the sum of income. Is that what we're really wanting here? What are we wanting instead? Average. Okay. Let's come down to value field settings, change that guy to average. All right. Now, what may we want to do here? Sort. Let's do smallest to largest, okay? So the worst paid profession on average is what? Okay, the best paid profession on average is what? Okay, I'm going to go off on a limb and assume that's not someone staying at home, okay? Why might I go off on that limb? Does $119,000 sound like an average salary of a stay-at-home person? Probably not. Okay, let's be realistic, all right? So that tells us the average salary. What else may we want to see? How about the age and salary? You guys interested in age? All right. Which ages do you think may have the highest average salary, by the way? Would you expect people who are young, who are middle-aged, who are almost at the top of the age, or who are at the top of the age to have the highest? Almost at the top? I'd probably agree with that. I think this is a real audit data set, by the way. Let's go largest to smallest. So 82, 20. Is that not a shock? Maybe this isn't a real data set. I thought it was. Yeah, I can't imagine a 17-year-old would have an average salary of $135,000. Now, this is an interesting time to talk about sampling bias. Okay, this could very well be actual data. I think it is actually, but it's not necessarily representative of the overall population. So that's when we get into the topic of sampling bias, which we're going to cover more in the next couple classes. Actually, we talk about basics of data analytics. All right, so you got a 90-year-old. They got an average of 124,000. And that could be real. Okay, they could have good retirement investments and that sort of thing. I don't think the 18-year-old is very likely to be making 100, almost 126 on average. But that's how you would do it in a pivot table. Does that make sense? What are some other things we may be interested in? Hours? Okay. That could certainly be interesting. So sum of hours is not really what we're looking for. We'll go with average again. I think that probably makes the most sense. See who's putting in the most hours. Let's go largest to smallest. 83-year-olds, goodness gracious. That's pretty funny, isn't it? Okay. So you can see we have descending things. Looks like a lot of the adults are working full-time hours on average. Maybe a little bit more even on average. All right. Let's go down here to the bottom. So it looks like a lot of the older ages. I mean, there's probably very few people in this data set who are 90. 4 hours for 117 grand. That'd be a pretty decent setup, wouldn't it? I'd do pretty much anything for 4 hours a week if I'm making that, okay? But we're not getting into that too much, all right? So we've got average of income. Let's go ahead and take both of these out. Okay, so we're just going to look at age and audit. Okay, so I think that's some of the last field. I think it's target adjusted. And instead of doing sum, we'll change this to average again. So the idea being the closer to 1 this average is, the more likely someone of this age is to be audited. Does that make sense? So just kind of looking at this, I don't really see any huge trends. So it looks like as you approach retirement, you're somewhat more likely to be audited, maybe, but it's not necessarily the most exciting thing with the rows as age. Maybe we want to make occupation, or better yet, education. Okay. So is there any sort of relation here? Looks like high school grad and professional, pretty likely to be audited, okay, according to this data set. Why might that be? You think those are more likely to be working cash jobs that would be more likely to be audited? Yeah, probably. Okay. Let's see. According to this, I would have a, let's see, what is this? I don't think I have a 63% chance of being audited, okay? But anyways, any other things we want to see with this? So if we were so inclined, we could also throw in, say, gender. Let's make gender a column, why not? Okay. So what we're doing here is we're taking a look at males and females with their respective levels of education, and we're seeing how likely they are to be audited. Okay. So high school male grads, looks like they're more likely to be audited. All right. And for most of these, it looks like males are more likely to be audited. Okay. Again, I don't remember exactly where this data set came from. I do believe it's an actual audit data set though. So that's what we're looking at there. Let's take gender out and let's make age a filter. We haven't shown filters off yet. Okay, so all a filter variable does, it's going to allow us to include or exclude various fields based on what we set. Okay, so I come up here to age. This is where the filter is. We can actually select multiple items. And right now we have everything selected. Let's say we want to deselect everything. We just click on the item for all. And now someone throw me your favorite ages. 22, a couple more. 21, one or two more. 18, 45, that's probably enough. This is how you use a filter, okay? So you always select the option for select multiple items, okay? Otherwise, you're not going to have a really easy time selecting or deselecting what you're wanting to. So let's hit our good friend OK. And now you can see the filter's applied, and it adjusts everything accordingly to those filter requirements. So I think we're going to stop right here. That's the basics of pivot tables. That's really about as far as we're going to go with them. I think you, at this point, would have a good idea of how to make one, how you could adjust various things as needed, and that sort of thing. So don't forget to do the lab tonight if you have not already submitted it. It's due at 11:59 p.m. Apart from that, I will see you all Wednesday. Have a great day. Yeah. Okay. Sure, I'll take a look at it.